like to welcome you all, and without further ado, I'm going to introduce Rebecca Yukika, a board member and pediatrician who's going to introduce keynote speakers.
Good evening. So how did I come to be here? And it goes back to what Jack was saying about keeping our practice interesting and engaging and finding better ways to do things. And so for me, it started with the co-op and artists giving my practice this questionnaire that we give to teenagers to ask them, you know, everything about sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And one of the questions on there is, of course, asking our teenagers about sex. And I always skipped the question asking them about oral sex because I thought, not really pertinent, especially if they weren't sexually active. And then I came to hear a talk and realized I was way off base and I need to be addressing this. And if I'm not doing well, I became very worried, what are other physicians not doing well? And I also really want to figure out why our schools can't do a better job, because I feel like that's where all of our kids are. That's a low-hanging fruit, as we like to say in medicine and in research. So I really want to figure out a way that we could get this message across. But before we can get the message across, we need to know what the message is. And so that's what our keynote speaker is going to help us with tonight. So I have the honor of introducing Dr. Michael Lyons, who's a family practitioner with White River Family Practice. And apparently he was a pioneer in giving sex ed in his practice. He has taught the rest of his practice how to do this well, and I am hoping to learn from him how I can do it better. So here's Dr. Lyons.
Thank you. My real job here is to introduce Cindy Pierce, who's going to provide the best education. But I'd like to set up a little background of sexuality in medicine as I introduce her. And I thought about this when the last week of December, the New York Times published a list of what they thought we should all do more of in 2019. And the first thing on that list was have more sex. I read that and I said, if Cindy was talking to me, she'd say, it should probably say have more good sex. And then I paused a little bit more and thought, if we're really going to promote good, mutually pleasurable sex in America, we need a lot more good sexuality education. And that's where Cindy's going to come in. Cindy, we're lucky to have tonight, is a national expert in sexuality education and speaks all around the country. But before Cindy starts, I want to put a plug in for sexuality education in primary care, and especially in pediatrics. To make my case for sexuality education in primary care, I want to tell several abbreviated stories. And I think like most happy primary care providers, we relish in our patients' stories, and we learn a lot from them. The first one is Jane. She's 45. She had her first orgasm in her second marriage at age 45. John is age 27. He presented to the office requesting Viagra. His main sexual activity has been masturbating in front of pornography. He could no longer get an erection with his wife. Sarah, age 22. She spent her teenage years pretending she was straight. In college, she got the gumption to tell her parents that she was gay. Her parents responded that they kind of knew all along, but no one had talked about it. Eric remembers being 11. At age 11, he was fondled inappropriately by a guest at the neighbor's house. He never told anyone. He recalls this saying, he never knew this kind of thing could ever happen. He didn't know what to do. Tom is 55. He was feeling anxious about his college reunion. In the era of the Me Too movement, he was worried he might be called out for his misogynist behavior back in college. In his defense, he said, I arrived at college, horny as most young men, and the only sexual education I had is what I got from my fraternity brothers. Mrs. Smith is 67. She was in the office one day. On review of systems, I asked if she was still sexually active. And she responded, no, but she was quite disappointed. She missed him. I asked if she'd spoken to her husband about it. She said, no, I can't do that. And then she said, by the way, you're seeing him next week. Fred is 78. His wife is in the nursing home. I asked when he went to visit. He said he doesn't. And then he explained with anger in his voice that when he was 35, his wife said, I don't want any more sex. You can accept it or leave. And he carried that anger all the way through. When I hear these stories, I'm convinced that we humans will be happier and healthier with more sexuality education. And Cindy has made a career of helping teenagers, young adults, and now primary care physicians become more comfortable talking about sexuality. One of her long-term goals is to encourage parents to accept the role as the primary sexuality educator for their children. Because as much as Rebecca has a goal that schools will do it, I think we're a long ways away from that. And I think we primary care physicians can help plant seeds that will bring Cindy's goal to fruition. And with that as a backdrop, I welcome enthusiastically my good friend, and this is Cindy Pierce.
Okay, so I have no intention of doing this work. I have 3 little kids, really little kids. Michael was our pediatrician for our children, and I ended up, my friends kind of bossed me into doing a comedy show about sex because I was really comfortable talking about it, youngest to 7. Lots of rotating sisters-in-law who were from the 70s, who were pretty open. So things were pretty comfortable in my house, not with my parents. Ended up, I had this comedy show, and then my nephew was in a fraternity, my niece was in a sorority in my hometown, and where Dartmouth is, at Dartmouth College, and ended up in their sorority and fraternity speaking to the group. My assumption was they have the internet, they've got all the information they need. And what I found in my talk with particularly the fraternity, 1 hour of a presentation, 2 hours of questions, alarming questions that made it clear that the internet is derailing people on understanding sexuality. So my kids are now 21, 19, and 17. When I took my kids to Michael, when the oldest turned 5, he said, he was the only person who had ever said this, and I confirmed that out in the world, he said it to other parents who didn't listen, but he said, you need to talk to your kids between the age of 5 and 7 about sexuality, because we now have the internet, so you have a choice. Either they're going to learn from friends with the internet, they're going to learn from the internet itself, or they're, the bus, on the playground. So you want a preemptive strike. You want to talk to them about healthy sexuality. And I thought, I think he's picking on me because I have a one-woman show about sex. So I go to my other friends who had Dr. Lyons. I said, so what did he say to you? And they said, oh yeah, he said between the ages of 5 and 7. And they said, but we're not going to do that because we learned in 5th grade, and that's perfectly fine. And I thought, well, I'm going to give it a whirl. So with all my children, who are now almost grown, I went for it. And each one was totally different. And I went for it. Each one was not, I thought the next one would be easier. None of them were easy. And I was pretty good to a certain point. And then the last, right when I got to the end, like, here we are. Every kid could smell my threshold. And they had a question or something that just dropped me off a cliff and threw me off my game. And oh my goodness. And it didn't go well. But I'm really comfortable falling on my face, picking myself up, putting myself back together and saying, look, I don't know the answer to that, or I'll get back to you, or that freaked me out, and let me work on that. So what I noticed was Michael was right. That if you talk to your kids before they have crushes, before they're interested in being with someone sexual, before they're even in that mode, you desensitize them. You get them used to talking about sexuality and hearing those words. And they're much more forgiving in 1st grade because their attention spans are about this long. So when you mess up, you can come back and rework it and they move on and they forget. way easier. It has paid off. My conversations with my kids through their teenage years, their conversations with their friends, they're alarmed when their friends are misinformed because so many parents want to protect their children's innocence. And in the age of the internet, the game has changed. So these are 2 books I've written. This one's for parents and educators, and this one is for parents of kids going to college, for college students, and even kids out in Tinder world dating. So what I am so grateful for, and I hope that you consider, there's so much information out there. There are so many books about these topics that it's overwhelming. I have a lengthy resource list that Troy may send to the participants here. It's not current on my website. The reason it is so lengthy is because I get so many questions over and over and over again about the same things. So that's why I've given you, put it in categories and given you extensive information. So, keeping informed. If parents, at White River Family Practice, Michael has kind of taught the other doctors, they have a lot of resources. Rebecca has a lot of things she is teaching, always learning, the open mindset of learning and teaching and keep growing because it's moving so quickly, you can't always be on top of it all. So I think what I say to my friends is when you do some research, when you say to those parents, when you have information about what's going on, when you sit down with your kid, you'll have much more conviction because it's not fun talking to your kid about sex. No one is like, I can't wait to have that sex talk with my kids. And it is not one talk. That's one thing that everyone wants to check that off the list. It's actually multiple talks. It's conversations, not one conversation. And so I think, what I say to parents is get a book club together. And maybe 2 of you read this book, 2 of you read that book, 2 of you read this book, and then discuss it. But the more information parents have, the more conviction they will have in those conversations. Social courage is something I talk to adults about, and you're going to hear it 3 times in this talk because I can't say this enough. I was marinated in social courage in a family of 7. By being the 7th kid, it was just, everyone was totally embarrassing, and you couldn't believe what they would say and speak their mind. And by the time I'm 21, I was doing the same thing, and I thought, oh, okay, all right. And social courage is having clear boundaries, speaking up, speaking the truth. And even though there are social consequences for that and dealing with that. But I show my kids, the best thing I can do for my kids is to show that I can be wrong and that I can make mistakes and that I'm fumbling and stumbling and that they can see me still do that and still be a confident person. Too many parents, and I live in Hanover, New Hampshire. I've grown up there. I run a business there. I've taught in the area. I will call it Precious Town, USA, where too many people get this feeling that they are so smart that they don't need any help parenting and they don't need any help with sex ed because they are brilliant. And my feeling, I think being the youngest of 7 and growing up in that town, I'm pretty good at being like, hey, need a little help here? Any help you can give me would be great. And that has served me so well. So we need to convince parents that they need to be okay being wrong. I taught first grade in one of my first grade, Mary and yes, and Don, they are the parents of one of my kids. I had first graders. First grade, they're just learning to read and write. I was a darn good speller in 3rd grade, but I will tell you multiple times, kids in my first grade class corrected my spelling on the chalkboard. That was the most awesome and empowering thing for those kids. I didn't try to cover myself up. I'm like, well done, thank you. Thank you. That kid's all puffed up, feeling good. We need to teach parents to do that for kids, to be wrong boldly. So also, what I loved when I went to Michael is I was talking to my kids about things. They get into their doctor. They thought I was a lunatic because none of their friends' parents were. One of my kids is, I was like, not all families talk about this. You might want to, it's not a secret, but it's definitely like our family does it differently. Just tread lightly. Don't worry, Mom. It's totally embarrassing that you talk about this stuff. The other kid said, I can't talk to my friend about that. He thinks babies came out his mom's bum. And I'm like, perfect, all right, great. So you kind of think, what are they going to say when they go to school? So to sit down with my kid in the doctor's office And then all of a sudden, Michael's talking about what's on the internet, talking about why we need less screen time, talking about bodies and sexuality. And all of a sudden, my kid's like, this is everywhere. This is weird. Like, Dr. Lyons is talking about it, and my parents, and then they realize they kind of accept it. So the more, you've got to get parents to take part in it. A lot of parents say, oh, they'll do it at school. We cannot rely on school. I worked in a very liberal town where they let us talk about a lot of things. And I will tell you that there's always one parent now, about 5 parents per class, who make a stink. And once they make a stink and the teacher has 5 meetings about why there shouldn't be sexuality education in the class, it's too exhausting. There's a whole lot of other stuff you got to be teaching, and even if you're determined, it's not worth your time. And then parents say, oh, my pediatrician will take care of it. And the doc, okay, you have 20 minutes to pull off all of that. It's the parent's job. Parents are the primary sexuality educator, and they need you to tell them that not once. Retention, I'm 53. And when I was 48, I got some feedback on I've had the same dentist office forever. I was learning new techniques on how to brush my teeth. I mean, that's pathetic. The same message since I was a kid, the same dentist office. And I'm having a breakthrough at 48, like, oh, I didn't know that little angle situation. Okay, so I'm not retaining. We as adults, by the end of this, you might be like, well, that lady's got a little retention problem in general, should be medicated. When she came to our office, we might offer that. And so keep giving the message. And when we say conversations, it's never one talk. You've got to keep having these conversations. And the bottom line is this. If we don't get these parents to speak to their kids about sexuality, the internet will certainly be right there to do it for them. So you can hand it over to the culture, you can say to them, or you can be that person. Believe me, my middle kid, she put her hand up the whole time. Oh my gosh, here we go again. She had so much resistance, but as much as they give you this, they also are doing this. And I didn't know that till she got to 8th grade. 2 of her friends, a 9th grader and an 8th grade, hugely misinformed by brilliant parents who wanted to protect their innocence. They're a G-rated family. They didn't want anything out there. And these 2 girls were terribly misinformed about 2 different concepts. And my daughter said all these things to them. They didn't believe it. I said, you need to talk to my mom. I got permission from the mother. She reluctantly gave me the daughters. We had to get away from the other kids and get in the minivan, and they're in the bucket seats like strapped there. Like, yikes. My daughter's in the back, and one of them said, one had the wrong information about what an orgasm was, and one had a misinformation about a douchebag. I guess my daughter gave her the history of the douche. Like the 50s, the big tube, and and then the 70s, and then the doctor said, no, the balance and the pH, no good. She knew it all. So all the time, she was practically giving me the finger while I'm educating her, giving me this. She soaked it all in. They can never unhear what you tell them. So as far as these conversations, as I said, primary sexuality educators are the parents. Between the ages of 5 and 7, Michael taught me by 8, that's your deadline. People come up with all kinds of excuses, right? I want to protect their innocence. They are not interested at all. They haven't asked questions. I don't think they're quite ready. People have this whole collection of ways to keep themselves from taking on that responsibility, right? It's unsettling. It is unsettling. But we've got to not wait for the question. You need to actively make it happen. Tell those parents. I already said, if you don't speak up, the culture will fill it up. Yes, and the awkwardness. I always say to parents and to kids and to everyone I know, social courage happens when you can dive into awkward soup, swim to the other side, and when you get out, shake yourself off, you're like, okay, I think I made it. Like, I got this. Like, I can do it again. You build those layers of social courage. Now, the long run. This thing, parents always say, they'd love for their kid to have a healthy relationship with their body. Everyone thinks they want their kid to be 30, 35 years old and not just be comfortable in their body, but also have a partner with whom they have a wonderfully respectful, balanced, awesome, pleasurable relationship. But what they don't get is that starts with their investment. It's an investment over time, layering and layering and layering. It's not one conversation. You just got to keep, and that starts at 3, the correct body names. I mean, in my family, it was like popo, all these weird ways. My father never even said the word. He'd be like, be careful of those creeps out there. They might show you there. This was the penis. That they thought people in trench coats, we lived in New Hampshire, I don't think there was really a big fear there, but he was really nervous. Didn't want his daughters to be violated by the men in trench coats out there in New Hampshire. So, now, the hard thing is this. Things are moving quickly. Social media platforms move quickly. Kids are interested in different things. Language is changing. That's why we need to stay informed. And I say to my kids, I didn't know about that. Like, tell me about that. I don't know. I actually don't ask my kids about their personal sex lives, their personal social media life. I ask them to tell me about what's the worst stuff people do on Snapchat. What kind of stuff is bad form on Instagram? What is awesome that people do on Instagram? Like, what are the things people are doing in a text chain that's bad? Like that you're like, no, not good. And kids will say, look, there's some stuff I can't stand. This one kid in this text chain is so mean. But, and I'm like, why don't you get off that text chain? Because if I get off that text chain, then I become the subject of it. So that's where social courage, speaking up first online, in person, we need to practice speaking up, calling those things out. So media shifts, social media shifts, they're happening all the time. Ask kids about other kids without names. I always say I don't want to hear any names of someone you speak about. Just tell me what's out there that you don't like. And I have a kid who's in the back seat, always sulky, so like one of those guys. And he's always looking out the window because I don't allow them to use their phones in the car. And they're like, 15 minutes without my phone. You poor dear. You poor dear. So I say, and they're like, there's nothing to do. It's so boring. I'm like, stare. You live in New Hampshire, and you stare out that window, soak it up, 15 minutes of woods in New Hampshire. Like, this is a skill, and you need practice, and you'll be grateful when you're 40, and I've taught you how to be bored. Stare. So, well, he's staring, skulking like this. And if I say, hey, you guys, tell me, what's going on Snapchat? Like, what's stuff people do that bugs you? That kid is practically climbing into the front seat, telling me story after story. I don't ask him about his life. That's prying into his life. But when I ask him about, what's out there, they have a lot to say. One of our friends, Michael and I have a friend who's a sexuality educator, and she always talks about keep the headlights on. People say, but they're not ready. We're not there yet. And I love 7th grade to 9th grade. A tremendous change occurs in those 2 times. Once they get a phone, the world changes. So that's where people say, well, we'll wait till it happens. I say, do you want to mop up or do you want to be ahead of the game? People say, well, if you talk about things like porn and sex, they're going to have it. The research is clear that actually when we talk to kids about sexuality, they make healthier choices. Actually, informed kids make healthier choices. And when it comes to porn, there is research at the Reward Foundation in Scotland. Your Brain on Porn, 2 great resources. Have all the data. If you don't believe what I say here today, and some of you are going to be alarmed by what I say, I'm just going to warn you, we're warming up, because when we talk about porn, you're going to be like, yikes! Okay, but I'm going to give you the truth, people. I'm going to lay down the truth. So putting the headlights on, you want to give kids information ahead of time so that they're ready. And it puts kids at ease. And some people, so when I go to a high school, sometimes I see a 9th grade kid who looks like a 3rd grade kid. It's usually a boy. He's a miniature human being, and I feel so badly that I am laying down some concepts that just seem so out of reach for that little guy. And the whole time, in the beginning, when I first started, I'd be like, this poor kid. My gosh, but I was that kid. I was this little goober, the last person to have sex. It's actually comical that I've written 3 books about sex. Anyone who, my friend Jack here went to high school, I was a little boy. I looked like a little boy well into 10th grade. So, hilarious. My friends are like, now we come to you with questions. That's so weird. So, lost my train of thought. Yeah. Anyone want to help me? External hard drive where I was? Kids, headlights, little goober in the audience. I feel badly the whole time. After my talk, you're in the dining hall, and you're kind of the toxic repellent. They're like, you don't go talk to that sex lady. And it's so random. I'm like, this old lady. I didn't start this till I was 39, I had gray hair. Well, once you're 40, you're 80, which is really liberating. These fraternity brothers asking me about penis size, hairy backs, anal sex. They're asking me all these questions. They'll ask you anything when you're old because you're no threat to their social life. So, and I had heard it all, grew up with boys, played sports, boys, so nothing fazed me. I have 25 nieces and nephews. I had heard all about what people are masturbating to. I'd watched the evolution of porn. And now I'm in a fraternity, like, yeah, well, okay, don't know the answer to that. I'll get you a resource. I'll be back in touch. And then there's, amazing conversations. But little goober, in a dining hall like this with twice as many people, after my talk, most of the kids have their tray, they're scurrying to their seat, like, yikes, that guy make his way through the dining hall. I just want to thank you. I want to thank you for talking about that stuff, telling the truth. Really appreciate that. I'm thinking, little goober, he has evolved. What is with that, okay? Here's the thing. Even if they're not ready, they're hearing so many things. You get to 5th grade, you're hearing about things in porn. You're hearing about a lot of things. The principals in 3rd grade are like, what have we got going out here on the playground? What they're hearing, the conversations. So they're trying to make sense of the world. And they'd rather know the truth and kind of have sense. It puts them at ease. So put those headlights on. And it is unpleasant. Tell the parents it is unpleasant. It is never joyful to be. It gets joyful because it gets funny. I always find it funny because I'm making so many mistakes and we get in territory. I was just telling these guys one time with my oldest guy, I was being proactive, talking about nocturnal emissions. We're down in the kitchen at 6:10 in the morning. And my husband was game. Like, that guy was game to have the sex talks. But he comes in the kitchen and he hears us speaking about nocturnal emissions, which is this term I learned from my 5th grader, by the way. He's like this little guy. And my son is like very studious about it. And Bruce is like, it is 6:10. I have not had coffee. And when you're talking about premature ejaculation or nocturnal emissions, like, what? I would get to this maybe in a couple of years. Like, we're already on it and we're moving along and time to get on the bus. Off you go. So that's how it goes in my house. So I always say persist, even if it's unpleasant. Wait, did I miss one? Yeah. Okay. Love this. I'm gonna read it for those who can't see it. So Natasha's saying, she's a sexual literacy educator. Without any meaningful guidance, children are being left to their own devices, literally and figuratively, to make sense of the graphic content they intentionally or unintentionally encounter online. So many parents come to me and say, I've looked at the history of my kids' search. We have all these blocks. We have all these things. We thought we were so safe. There's no block that kids don't have a workaround. They will find their way around. And the parents say, on day 1, they looked up boobies, not tits, not breasts, not boobs. Boobies, that's how you know they're wee little things. Boobies was day 1. Day 4 was full penetration. Day 5, the parents are crying. Like, it was choking and hitting. And day 6, double penetration. I can't even mention day 7. And these parents, this kid has not come to their parents and said, I have seen something freaking. Sometimes that happens. And you're lucky if you do. And you got to keep your pulse down. And you got to just say, totally normal to be curious. Totally normal to want to see naked people. But let me tell you about the porn industry. They're looking for people like you. They're looking for consumers. So you're lucky if your parent comes to you. But sometimes the parent finds this history and they're totally freaked out. And you just got to tell them, keep that pulse down. Got some thoughts on that later. But so screen time. Screen time is something like, I love what Michael Lyons says. He says, talk to your kids. Keep talking to them about screen time, time on their phone, time on a laptop, time on a device, until they leave your house, until they graduate. My oldest kid, we didn't let our kids get phones until halfway through 8th grade. Michael has kids who are a little older than ours. I kind of followed his thing. Now there's a movement called Wait Till 8th, because kids are not developmentally ready to be on Snapchat and, it's a runaway train. I think parents of younger kids are more tapped into that, people in their 30s, but there's a whole, my generation, there's a 15-year gap that feels like we were really involved with our kids. Some people so involved in every little thing except the phone. They just handed that thing over and trusted all would be well. So I talked to my oldest kid all the way through high school, but I felt like any chance he got, he was on there. We did 7 to 9. I didn't do a family meeting. I said from 7 to 9, we're all, the parents and the kids, we're not going to have phones on. I know you're going to be on a screen doing your homework, and I know you can access some of your social media, but we're going to eliminate the phones from 7 to 9 just to take one screen out of the mix. And my oldest guy was like, well, Mom, you're usually kind of diplomatic. Like, this is cool. But they didn't, and I thought the youngest kid was going to flip out. I thought he was going to just give me the business. He said, I'll go make a basket with a little sign. And I thought, so it's funny when the adult says this is what it is, their game. So we had no phones in the car, no phones up in the room, no laptops in the room. No, I'm strict about it, but I don't feel like I'm really getting through to them. My kid goes off to college, kind of felt like I failed. I was like, wow, I worked really hard and it didn't really pan out. And when he comes home, sometimes he says, I don't have any homework tomorrow. I can be on my phone. I'm like, no, I don't have homework and I am not on my phone. Well, Mom, I'm in college now. Well, if you'd like to be on your phone, why don't you rent an apartment and take care of, okay, I'll put my phone away. Like, So he went off. Sometimes I make a plan. I like to talk to him on the phone. We text to say what time would be a good time. And multiple times in his freshman year, he said, Mom, I'm not going to have my phone. I leave my phone in my room when I go to the library. That, for him, a year before that would be like leaving his lung and his liver like back in his room and like heading off to the library. I mean, it was so shocking. Certainly he can access things on there, but it kind of gets through. So there's that layering. Keep having the conversation, it'll happen. Great, on point, a couple years ago, maybe a year and a half ago, great thing on the wait till 8th movement, on really holding to that. With my oldest kid, waiting halfway through, and I make my kids pay for their phones. This is something to suggest to your patients. When your kids have to pay the monthly fee, it is amazing how they don't break their phones, they don't lose their phones. It's a beautiful thing. They take such good care. I do not give them Christmas presents that are related to the phone. Any phone updates they want to do, they pay for. One kid's cheaped it out at like $40 a month. One kid's $80 a month. They've got their own thing. And, it's just changed. That really made everything. My one daughter, she breaks the screen. She would buy the $16 little kit and fix the screen. Then people were paying her to fix their screen. She was so capable, felt like a total badass. Like, I got this. This is my new business. And it was great. It felt really capable. So the parents are also the biggest problem, right, with the screens. We were at an orientation with all the parents in the audience, and one of the administrators is up in front speaking, and one of the parents, what are you going to do about screen time with our kids while they're in this school? Like, what are you going to do? And he said, cast your eyes around this room right now, all the parents. Sorry. So we need to model it. We need to model it and not be on our phones. And everyone says, but I'm so important. I am the breadwinner in this family. I am so amazing. I must have my phone because I have so much to do. A kid will tell you they have a lot to do. What's great for my kids is they say, my mom is such an asshole. I'm like, call me anything you want. I do not care. I don't care what they call me. She doesn't let us have our phone from 7 to 9. Perfect. Make me the stinker. Glad to take the stinker. But and that's another thing. Trying to be the cool parent. The kiss of death. Some people say, oh, you're so funny and fun. Your kids must think you are so cool. No, I am the least cool human, and that is awesome. It liberates me to say no, mean no, hold to no. I am not funny to them. I rank 6 in a family of 5 as funny behind the dog, okay? Like, nothing funny about me to those kids, just annoying. So the brain research is interesting, and I think we can all learn from this. I've been to 2 Mindfulness 2.0 conferences and hearing people talk about screen time in the relationship. It's not the phone that's evil, it's how the phone is used, right? There's positive things happening on phones, for sure. That doesn't mean you need more time on them. But the brain research is clear. When our phones are on and next to us, our brains are cranked. And when I turn the phone off and it's still next to us, we're in our pocket, our brains slow down a little bit, but they're still cranked up. Because apps are made to draw us back in. And there's so much possibility, right? When you can see the phone or you know it's there, it's like, oh yes, I could be checking. It's only when your phone is off and out of sight is that your brain calms down. And I do it as soon as I don't need to be speaking that getting a kid home, I pop that phone into my purse out of sight, and I'm so much more productive. Another thing is the tomato thing, the 25 minutes, set a timer, have your email off, social media off, do the work you're doing, and when the timer goes off, then get your phone out, do what you want to do on your phone, set a timer for 5 minutes because you could get lost on social media or following up. There's all this, if I can slay all these dragons and then I'll have free time. That could be decades, people, decades. Once again, showing the other side of awkward. Show kids the other side of awkward. Another thing is kids have so much courage behind their phones, like through their thumbs, like what they'll say, they'll send things off, and they're like, yeah, they've got all this confidence. Would they ever say it in person? Amazing, the racism. Occasionally when my kid was first in high school, I said, occasionally I'm going to ask to look at your phone. And you can say, no, I will not sneak on there, but we're going to have a conversation about why you don't want me in there. And if you say yes, and I look and something freaks me out, I'm going to give 24 hours before I have a conversation because I get tweaky. So, and sometimes like something shows up and I'm like, whoa, what's this? Like, why didn't you call that out? And we have a great conversation. It makes him think about, well, I wish I could have said something and I didn't, but maybe in the future. We just have great conversations about where do you exercise some social courage, take a risk, pay the social consequences for speaking up. So having those conversations with kids is really important. Mindfulness, we know, kids are more anxious than ever. So I would say my theme of last year, so I spoke 59 days last year. And so I was sometimes in a school all day, sometimes for an hour. But what I will say to you is that anxiety among boys, I think it's always been there and it used to be able to be concealed. It is overflowing at this point. Boys are struggling with so much. I mean, all kids are anxious and the phones are part of it. They have a device that 24/7 reminds them of what they could be, should be, would be, if they had, if they did, if they bought, boom, 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 boom. It's endless. It is the thing that constantly, the need to look and appear. One girl, I read about a girl who was 16 years old, all her friends, she said, they post all these like 6 sexy pictures, they get all these comments, all these people following them and making comments and liking their photos. She said, I post pictures of rainbows and puppies and 6 people like it, no comments. So she said, I'm going to do an experiment. So she spent 45 minutes straightening her hair, makeup, and then she gets in the position, which is like, head tilts, and like hands out like this, and pigeon toes, you look a little skinny, and takes a photo, and within minutes, 50 likes on that photo, and the comments, particularly among girls. Goals, my goal is to look like you. Gorge, so cute. You bitch, heart. Like all these comments. Boys writing things like pornalicious, I'd like to tap that. Would that kid, now I say to people, if someone says something like that, just do a little experiment. Go ask them, don't chew them out. Just go calm and just say, just curious. Like, and when you ask a kid who sent you a dick pic, a picture of his penis on the phone, And you don't want that. And if you ask him, just how many people did you send that dick pic to? How many people responded? What did you think? What were you hoping for? When you ask that person, they're not like, yeah, this is, no, they're like, oh, oh, so awkward. I encourage people, make awkward. If you don't have the courage to approach that person about the dick pic you didn't like, find your saucy friend. Everyone has one. Everyone. And the thing is, are boys getting nude pictures from girls they don't want? From whom they don't want? Yes, who are uncomfortable. But if you're a boy and you speak up and say, what's this? You're called a pussy. You're called a fag. Amazing how we live in still such a the gender straitjackets, the expectations of girls and boys. I'll talk about that. So mindfulness, I think it's becoming something athletes are doing. The Seattle Seahawks, Michael Gervais, I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce his last name, but not the Office guy, Michael Gervais, who he works with the Seattle Seahawks on dealing with their own personal part of their staying calm and finding peace and getting focused and being in the moment, and how that started before they won the Super Bowl. Years ago, Phil Jackson was working with with a guy named George, I don't know his last name, working with the Chicago Bulls, and everyone kind of teases, saying, what's this about? But this is making a difference for athletes. That is going to help trickle down. And schools that have, Proctor Academy has a program, a mindfulness program, where kids pile in, makes a huge difference for kids. One of my favorite sexuality educators and a good friend of Michael Lyons, Dr. Lyons, is Karis Dennison. She was featured in Girls and Sex, if you've heard of that book. And she says, my work connects teens to their goals of making as many choices that end in honor and joy rather than guilt, shame, and regret. Obviously, the prefrontal cortex is not developed. Kids are going to make choices that don't work out that well. But we want kids to be reflective about them. We want them to be more present and pay attention and be more mindful of the choices they make, and just always aiming for. And those are where these conversations about relationships and sexuality can make a huge difference. Things to consider. These are random segue-free moments that I feel that I must share with you. Microaggressions. A lot of parents, a lot of teachers, a lot of educators, when they hear little kids on the playground being racist, saying racist comments or being mean, these kinds of things, testing boundaries, everyone says, well, I'm not too worried about that. I'm really worried about later. I'm worried about sexual assault. I'm worried about sexual harassment. But when we hold kids accountable, and some of you who have been doctors for many, many years, you watch the change of parents who came along who didn't know how to say no to their kids. And we're just like, oh, my precious little wonder, she's so great. I gotta let him be himself or be herself. And while they're not paying any attention, they're all over these kids about their achievements in athletics and their achievements in school, but behaviorally, no boundaries. Kids need boundaries. We know that. I think this next generation, my nephews and nieces who are raising their kids, they're like, we saw the doormat parent in action. We are taking a stand here. We are not going to do that. So calling kids out for being cruel, being mean, starting when they're young, that's really an important thing. I talked about the dick pics and nudes. This is for real. People say, oh, that's not really a thing. That's kind of a little bit of a thing. Dick pics and nudes. When we say to kids, do you know it's illegal to send a nude picture or a picture of your penis on the internet? Do you know that's illegal? It's the distribution of porn. And you could get in a lot of trouble. You could be on a sex offender list. All of that is true. But you know what kids say? They're like, these adults, they are not reliable people. They know nothing because 98% of the people are sending dick pics and nudes and no one's getting caught. Now, when you get caught, suddenly your grandparent knows about your dick pic, and that is a horrible consequence and a beautiful one that deters them from sending their dick pics anymore. Now, people say, why are they sending dick pics? I talk to boys about this all the time. Once again, old 80-year-old woman that I am. And they will tell me, they're like, well, dicks are funny. We send them to our friends. It's not all about sex. We send them to our friends because they're hilarious. I'm like, okay, what else? Because we want blowjobs and sex. We're hoping converts. Yeah, and it works out for them. This is the thing. We say, well, that's not going to work. Sadly, people, it does. That's not the fault. Everyone says, those girls, they have no self-respect. What? They have no self-esteem. We're talking about brilliant young women who are killing it in the classroom, who are leaders, athletic, doing it. Sexual agency among young women right now, tragically, brutally low. Not much sexual agency. So it's like, well, if I don't send this nude back, or if I don't respond to this dick pic, I'm going to be sexually irrelevant. I'm going to be approved. So there is a lot of pressure on all girls. I want to say that right now, low income and upper middle class girls are making the same choices, are feeling the same stresses, the same pressures. So this idea that our brilliant young women don't have these problems is just not true. So dick pics and nudes flying around. One thing I hear from college men, they're like, would you talk to women? We cannot believe how women will, we can send one dick pic and acquire 15 to 25 nudes from one woman. I'm like, you need to tell me how that works. I cannot even imagine. Tell me how that works. They say you send a dick pic. You say send nudes. They send one nude picture, and all you have to say back, H-O-T, hot. Prrr, the praise. We've got the praise. So then she sends another. Then you tell which one you like better. All you have to do, you don't even think they're hot. You don't even think they're interesting. But you can just praise this woman, and she will keep sending you nude pictures. Yikes. I said to those men in that fraternity, I said, fellas, I'm telling on you. I'm telling every girl I know. They're like, please do. It's pathetic. We can't believe this happens. Now, fellas will say to me, also very naive, bright seniors in college, sitting in a whole group, and their assumption is when a girl sends a picture of herself masturbating, they say, oh, 80% of women are masturbating, right? Like 80%. I'm like, where's that coming from? Where's that? Well, we get pictures of people masturbating. Okay, videos of them masturbating or pictures? Pictures! And then half the guys are like, they're not really masturbating, they're just touching themselves. No! If there's a picture and they're touching themselves, they are masturbating. Actually, let's, and they go back and forth. There's always a half and half. And these boys are like, if a girl asks me to choke her or hit her, I know she likes to be choked. The other guy's like, really? Like, don't you think she might be asking that because that's what she thinks you like? Oh, no. And they get so upset. And by the end, they're like so disappointed. Like, we take it at face value. And so many young women are competing with porn. And there's this idea, like, if you want to be relevant, this is what's expected. So the dick pic and nude thing, sad times, but a reality. Inclusive language. So around gender identity and sexual orientation, very important to talk to parents and as doctors to use language that makes it okay, that they know it's okay if they identify. And just for those who don't know, sexual orientation and gender identity are two totally different things. Sexual orientation, and there are many orientations, more than, and some people get so overwhelmed, they're like, okay, this is too many orientations. Like, what is pansexual? What is bisexual? You should look those things up and learn about maybe some of the most common, but the difference between pansexual is bisexual, I either like male or female. Pansexual is I'm okay with gender nonconforming, I'm okay with male, female, anything in between. So gender identity is not how you are physically. Cisgender people, who are born with the genitals that match who they identify with. But a lot of kids really don't feel right. And some by the age of 3 or 4, I am not a girl. I am not a girl. I know I'm not a girl. I know I'm not a boy. And parents kind of say, oh, that's normal. But really, the kids who persist, you have to give them that. And part of it's the language we use. And I know some families who are really stifling about that when their kids are telling them something about how they identify and how hard that is. So some kids will socially transition where they will wear the clothes that are typical or stereotypical. Some kids later will take hormones. Some kids will have their pituitary gland suppressed until they figure out where they identify. Very few people, so female to male surgery, people say, you know, a lot of people my age say, well, they're not really that other gender because they haven't had the surgery. Those surgeries are so expensive. Female to male, something like $95,000. Most kids aren't going to do that. And most parents aren't going to pay for that, especially when they have college. So hormones, top surgery, there's different levels of transitioning. But making sure kids really feel, encouraging parents to use that inclusive language. Even though gender is a spectrum, we still live in a super gendered world. Walk into the Gap, Target, any of these stores, and boom, you've got Boyland and Girlland, pink, stink, purple, and then some blues with a little silver swish going on. And then on the boy side, it's green, dark blue, gray, camo, and red if you are feeling saucy, and bold and willing to test those gender straitjackets. I mean, it's amazing how divided that is. So in that, now young men, what I hear from boys all the time is this constant pressure to prove their masculinity and their heterosexuality, whether they're heterosexual or not. For girls, I call it compliance training. I hear it all the time. They say, I'm supposed to be nice. I'm supposed to be nice. And everyone says I have to be nice. Like, assert yourself, but don't be a bitch. Be interested in sex, but don't be a slut. Very narrow window. Boys have the narrow window too. It's like, be a stud, but don't be a pussy. Like, be emotional, but don't be a pussy. There's that whole thing. Like, you know, boys always say, all girls say they want a sensitive guy. As soon as you're sensitive, they're freaked out. They call you a pussy. Like, tough to ride that line. So this narrow window, we put kids in, these super narrow windows. So I hear from young men all the time, what about all the women who falsely accuse men? What about all those women who accuse men of sexual assault or sexual harassment? It's false accusations are significantly lower than we think. And I say to boys, instead of focusing on what you can get away with it, we need to teach kids about consent, communication, respect, and have that conversation. And to teach them about intervening. And consent when they're little kids is playing in the playground, playing in the sandbox. Someone's knocking over your stuff without asking. That's consent. We can bring consent into all kinds of things with toddlers. As I said, the high winds, all kids are under the social pressures with social media and the internet. So porn culture, here's what I have to say. Masturbation, beautiful, magical, healthy, normal for all genders. I'm all about it. Some people are like, what are you trying to stop masturbation? No. So I get zero resistance from high school and college age men talking about porn. They are desperate for answers. They want to know how things work. And these are men of all orientations. They're like, porn is misleading. They know it. They're just trying to get through the day. Now, here's the thing. Porn back in the day, you had to smuggle the magazine by your mother, hide it under your mattress where every boy hid it. Sister finds it, brings it out, there's a little shame. Then there was the VCR because some dad on the street had a porn stash up in the attic and one kid got a hold of that and that kid was the man. And he would pass around the videos. But those videos got so much use, they didn't eject very well. I did hear many stories. The guys were like, my parents are going to the movies. I've got this amount of time. Here we go. Watching porn. Got 10 minutes, try to eject, won't eject, they get a fork, they get a crowbar, they're unscrewing the thing to get that thing out. I mean, when you play baseball with the boys, you hear it all. And when you look like a boy, they tell you everything, right? I knew too much about boys' masturbation habits at too young of an age. So who is resisting this idea about porn? It is men in their 40s and 50s and 60s. Who defend internet porn. They're like, we had magazines, they've got the internet. Why are you so critical? Huge difference. My kid was looking at Playboy or Penthouse. I would cheer him on. I think that's like a Hallmark card compared to internet. I'm like, take that VCR with that old 70s porn, give it a go there. I mean, and erotic literature, you're at least making you're using your imagination. Porn has become increasingly violent. And the thing is this, I would not I didn't really want to know this. I didn't want to know any of it. But they were so desperate for information, and they just kept hearing story after story. And when I tell adults, they'd be like, that's not true. My child is going to Yale, and he's brilliant, and he doesn't have time for internet porn. And then I'd hear parents say, my son is up in his room studying for hours at a time on his laptop. You keep telling yourself that. So really, people, who's resisting the information and now the research is clear about porn? It's men who had to grow up in magazines. When I talk about porn addiction, I think most young guys are not dealing with addiction. I worry about men my age who went from magazines and then the internet came out with that. Suddenly they can't go to their work. They can't parent. They are just lost in internet porn. More of an addiction problem, I would say, for older men. Now, the thing is, if you're not a teenager, giving up porn, let's say you get addicted, as a grown person whose brain is developed, it is actually quite easy to give up. Once you give it up, it takes, your brain can let go of it and rewire to where you're going. Teenage brains are sponges, ready, prone to addiction more. That's why alcohol and drugs, they are primed. But really, most of these kids, one kid said to me, senior in college, he said, well, I'm only looking at porn till I have a girlfriend or a wife. I thought, oh dear, I'm going to shatter his dreams. And I did. I said, well, I'm a mother of 3 with 2 jobs, and I'm just going to tell you, you're going to want to keep up the masturbation skills for your whole life because you're not going to get a wife or a girlfriend and have sex on tap. He was so shocked. He was like, what do you mean? He thought his masturbation days would be over. I said, no, you get babies in the mix, you get a job in the mix. Life is busy. You're like 10 minutes on Tuesday. We'll pull off a little sex at noon when my kids are, it is a joke keeping sex going after kids with a job and a life. So, and just the exhaustion, it just can't happen. So, so the age of exposure, the most common age of exposure right now for boys in porn is 9 years old. And they're obviously not masturbating. That's the boobies guy. And the problem with boobies guy is Pornhub is waiting for boobies guy, right? And so that kid looks it up, and they're all of a sudden there are these boobs, and he's just like, whoa! And then up in the corner, there's something better. That's how that's a runaway train. Pornhub says, hey, something better over here. And the kid's like, click, whoa, click, whoa. And it is a bottomless pit. Now, is there healthy porn that's respectful? 800,000 pages below the most viewed porn, which is violent, generally violent, a lot of anal sex in there. Anal sex has become something that's a casual thing. People think if you don't do that, some people do enjoy anal sex, the number of people having it. I hear plenty of people who are not enjoying it at all, but feel like if they don't have it, then they're not sexually adequate people. So there's so much pressure around this stuff. And then sometimes I talk to young women who are like, don't slut shame me because I own my sexuality. I own it. And I'm like, preach it, sister. I love it. I'm all about that vaginal pride. Okay, tell me what that looks like, that empowerment. You know what she says? I give pleasure to my male partners. And people kind of think she's a badass. And then I say, are you having orgasms? Almost all the time. The response is, no, I don't really know about orgasms. And I say, then hush yourself on the empowerment. Because until you know how your body works and you can be the GPS and guide your partner, the terrain is complicated. Every day a woman's body is different. You need direction. It is something you don't figure out. The figuring out is, I figured it out how to ask questions and for directions. That's what I figured out. So whatever age. So the other thing is that global traffic, 30 to 35% what's on the internet is porn. At some level, some nudity and some fully graphic porn. Boys and girls and all genders are looking at porn. People always say, everyone talks about it like it's a boy thing. Certainly girls are looking at porn. Here are the reasons. Some girls say, well, boys look at it, so I'm going to look at it too. I want to know what sex is like, so I'm going to look at internet porn. Some girls say, I look at internet porn to give my friends sex dares to try. I look at porn to see how to act. Porn is different than a drug. With a drug, after a while, you don't get high. You need more of the drug. With porn, you need variety. That's why the porn industry each year, the stakes are getting higher. All right. What are my concerns? What I've heard for years now, 15 years. I am not a doctor. I have a master's in education. I don't even put my MED on my book because I did not learn any of this as a teacher. And I was a teacher for 10 years. None of this was learned there. I learned this in the trenches, talking to boys and answering questions, and the questions told me so much. So what I mostly hear is their skewed expectations, how bodies look and how they respond. The amount of violence and aggression in sex. So the women in porn, the average age a woman dies who is in the porn, who's a performer, is 37 years old. The average shelf life of a woman who performs in porn is 3 months. Shelf life meaning she's in the business for 3 months. And you'll hear young men say, who are you kidding? These women are living the dream, man. They've got 1 million followers on Instagram. They are making bank. They are not making bank. 3-4% of women in porn are making good money for a short period of time. They're not even called by their names in porn. They're called the hole, the bitch, the meat. I mean, and if you think I'm like off the rails, like this is the difference. Like this is why you're like, Playboy, come back, come back. It is amazing how sexual assault is featured, women convinced, held down, and then resisting, and then that's kind of the story, and then she resists, and then she's having amazing orgasms over and over. And it's interesting in porn, the men last forever and ever and ever, and the women are kicking out, multiple orgasms, ejaculating across the room. It's so misleading. The average time it takes a man to have an orgasm to ejaculate is 4 minutes. The average time it takes a woman to have an orgasm is 20 minutes. Average could take 40. Okay, so that's kind of misleading. And I have 9th grade boys say, so I know what women like because I read 50 Shades of Grey. I'm like, lad, I call that 50 Shades of crap. Like that is not helping you. And those boys sometimes say, why do women like to be raped? You're like, okay. All right, okay, how much time? Oh, you tell me. I thought you were giving me the wrap it up. So what is not in porn is respect, is intimacy, is kissing, is really respectful, loving, intimate relationships. That's what's missing. So, I mean, I know 2 women who went to Dartmouth, they're in their late 20s now, and they're like, we're so sick of dating guys who want to choke us, hit us, and hold us down, and paw at us. We're so sick of it that they started an audio porn app. An audio porn app. They're like, we're not doing the kinky stinky. There's enough kinky stuff out there. We're doing bisexual, lesbian porn, heterosexual porn, people telling stories. They have these people reading, plot, and you should see the 15-year-old boys in my audience who are like, can you tell me the name of that app again? I'd really like to look at that. Boys are actually really open to the exit ramp. Use your imagination. Obviously, the research says it would be ideal if boys could not use an aid to masturbate. But I would prefer a kid listening to an audio porn or a book or looking at a magazine versus looking at internet porn. Like it's just a different deal. So not a lot of respectful relationships in porn. Gender and racial stereotypes hugely reinforced in Asian women are treated as a fetish. African American women, if you are a woman of color, you are paid half as much as a white woman. If you are a man in porn and you do a scene with a woman of color, you often don't get work after that. It is amazing how many things, like half as much money. So to spend a whole day, and if you have in your contract, I'm not going to do this, this, and this, halfway through the shoot, the director may say, well, you're going to do that, or you're not going to get your money. And so they kind of boss you into it. 33% of people in porn are trafficked to do that work. And by trafficked, I don't mean across borders. Forced work is trafficked. That's what really we mean by trafficked. So forced work, 33% of women in porn are trafficked to do that work. Biggest concern is genital image. Kids, average size penis in porn, 8 inches. Average size penis of a fully erect adult male, 5.14. There are some studies that say 5.5. I said that with a group of sophomores. One kid sheepishly raised his hand and said, I read a study that said 5.14. I was like, oh, do you have your laptop? And all the boys are like this. Oh, And the girls are looking around like, why is this important? 5.14, 5.5, like pretty basic. No, these boys are like, woo. I said, get out your laptop, look up that study. This kid is like, he's like, he names the study, 5.14, the boys. Yeah! I felt like that was a public service. Like penis has been an issue for all, like I remember having to console, I hadn't even seen a live penis and I had to console my guy friends like, I think you're good. Like I asked the girls, I think you're good. No one's really worried about it. It's like a guy thing, right? And that is the number one question. I'm very nervous. Like my penis has this, that. Oh, they all work, those things. They all work. Roll with it. So genital image, when you're looking at porn, you start to feel inadequate. Women in porn, surgically altered, waxed from anus to navel, surgically altered. The vulva, the labia are trimmed. 12 different surgeries now that were just for women in porn. Now women feel pressured to get it because their male partners are saying you're too flappy, you don't look right. So luckily there's this man in England, an artist. And really he used the word vagina, which is, your doctors, you probably know, is the hallway that leads the vagina. But the vulva is where all the goodies reside, the clitoris and the sensitivity, all the good stuff. So he did the Great Wall of Vaginas. He had 400 women take molds of their vulvas, send them to him. He made a casting. He has 400 vulvas on the wall. And women come in and they're feeling so much better about themselves. Like, oh, I'm okay, I'm normal. But if you're not a lesbian and you've only seen your own vulva and someone says you're too flappy, you get panicked. And this is the thing this is why porn and this kind of thing has changed how people feel about their bodies. People with body image issues, now they have genital image issues. Talk about anxiety. So erectile dysfunction, most common email I get from boys and men. It used to be they'd make a fake Gmail with a different name and write me, you talked about erectile dysfunction, I have a few questions. And then they came from their regular email. Then they'd walk up to me and say, can we speak privately? And we'd go to a secret corner and we'd talk about erectile dysfunction. Now I'm like becoming kind of like I know too much about erectile dysfunction. These are 15, 16, 20-year-old guys. Now they come up in 2s and 3s. And with the teacher still in the room, they're like, can we talk about erectile? They're fearless now. They're just desperate. And here's what I say. And I said it in 2006. I said to a group of guys, what would happen if you didn't look at porn for 3 weeks? I didn't think they would try it. I'd already just heard 2 hours of their masturbation habits. They 6 months later, the juniors in that room are now seniors. And I was interviewing them for a book. And 2 guys come up to me and they're like, hey, we did your porn detox. I was like, oh, well then, how'd it go? And one guy said, I have been off porn for 6 months. This is 2006. These studies hadn't even come out. No more erectile dysfunction. My highlight reel is back to healthy. My sex with a partner is amazing. I am getting my work done. My depression has lifted. I am just feeling so alive. The other kid says this. All of those things are true. For 2 months, I was off porn. All of those things occurred, and I decided to go on a very reduced diet of porn, and everything's creeping back into my head. And this poor kid, and I thought, I better say that all the time. Now the research is clear. That's exactly what everyone who quits porn says. Now, quitting porn is the first start. There are other reasons erectile dysfunction happens. Aging, alcohol, drugs. But at 16, porn's probably the biggest thing. But anxiety medication can affect erectile dysfunction. Depression medication, ADHD medication, high-fat diet, getting psyched out. Once they think they've got erectile, they're like, I'm going to get it up. So, can't get it up. Like once you psych yourself out, it's really hard to get back in the game. Biggest thing, pleasure, female pleasure. No one teaches girls about pleasure. Everyone says, I want my daughter to own her sexuality. If you genuinely believe that, we need to teach girls about their pleasure zones. Now, here's what's interesting. When you talk about this with people who are kind of uncomfortable, they're like, well, really, sex is not about orgasms. Suddenly, it's not about orgasms when we start talking about female orgasms. Suddenly, it's just about intimacy, and there's all different ways. There are certainly many ways to be intimate. There are certainly ways to be intimate without ejaculating, without having an orgasm. But come on, people. You need to know your body. You need to be able to direct your partner to where you have pleasure and choose whether you're going to just be intimate without orgasms or not. But let's not go with, sex is not about orgasms. Women need to know how their bodies work, and it's complicated. 8,000 nerves living under a hood. It's like a garage. You need to lift that clitoral hood to access the clitoris. It's very sensitive. It's moving camp. It's not behaving. 75 to 80% of women do not experience orgasms with penetration alone because the clitoris is not in that position. It needs extra stimulus from her own helping hand, from a vibrator, from her partner's hand, which is a carpal tunnel event. It is complicated. People are like, what about the G-spot? Isn't that the same? The G-spot is 2 inches up the front wall of the vagina, a lima bean type item, fully unresponsive in a whole lot of women. Unresponsive till they're in their 30s for some women. Unresponsive through their whole life for some women. Some women responsive every time, creating a vaginal orgasm. Mysterious, no one's talking about it. There's a whole bunch of female engineers creating vibrators that work. Hilarious story. When I first spoke to those Dartmouth football players in 2006, there was this one kid, wide-eyed, alarmed by what I spoke of. He was just like, really? Is this happening? He goes off to UPenn to go to med school. What year do you get your cadaver? What year is it?
First year.
First year, gets the cadaver. Assignment, tag a body part and ask everyone in the room to identify it. He's like, I think I'm going to tag the clitoris. Because it's that woman, that crazy old lady, thinks not a lot of people know. Let's see. Tags the clitoris. People coming around with their clipboards. Brilliant. Brilliant, UPenn students. Women, men, cancerous tumor, they call it. All these glands I've never even heard of or once read and do not know now because my brain is not very sciencey. All these different glands. He was so freaked out. He wrote me a letter. He gave me all the percentages, and I had it printed. It's in my files, but I'm drifty over 50, and I cannot find it. But he had exactly like most of the men had no idea what it was. An alarming number of women who were probably over 22, right? Like, not many people go to med school. Fully grown women, possibly quite sexually active at that time, no idea what it was. He was like, keep doing what you're doing. Female pleasure. So some great resources. I have them in my extensive resource list, but I'm just going to say to you, if you think I'm a wingnut, and you're just like that woman, she's not a doctor. She doesn't know what she's talking about. Take a look at your brain on porn, and you will come out of there saying, whoa, okay, I can see. The Reward Foundation in Scotland, Love, Sex, and the Internet, they're doing great research. Reboot Nation is, Gabe Deem is one of the guys, and the other guy, I can't think of his name. But these guys talk about giving up porn and they're, being 5 years sober, being 6 years sober, and what that's like. Really important, because when you do give up porn, you get depressed, sometimes you can't get aroused for a long time, but then your brain reworks. Talking to kids, you know what? I'm going to leave that up there and you can take a look at that. And I'm going to take a few questions because you've got to get to your free time. Sorry, what do you need me to do?
The one before.
Oh, the one before. Oh, I was like, and you can actually write me an email. You can find me on the internet, cindypiercespeaker@gmail.com, or go to my website. And I'll send you my list of resources because it's not updated on my website at this time. My website hasn't been touched in years. I got to rally to get that done. But these are resources. So you can take a look at this on how to talk to kids about porn and what we should be telling parents. And there are great resources out there about that. But I'd love to take some questions. If anyone has questions. Maybe they're like, I don't think I want to ask her. Oh, yes.
So I often have, not often, but more often than like, have the young male adults come in who've been watching too much porn, now are in a relationship, have erectile dysfunction. And so I tell them no more porn. But what else can I tell them? And they always want to know how long.
How long to go with that?
Until they're going to get their function back.
It depends. Each kid depends. Each person depends on how long, how much they've been doing. So another kid, this is another question I get. What's too much masturbation? Can you tell me that? I mean, from seniors in college to ninth graders. What's too much? It can be every month, every week, every day, multiple times a day. Some people freak out like 4 times a day. Is that okay? Time is on your side. You're going to grow out of that. But there might be a phase where you're masturbating 4 times a day. But porn has made it so kids are, and they say, what's the sign if you've been masturbating too much? Blisters. Okay, and you're thinking, no, plenty of blisters out there, and you're wondering, like, where's the lube, fellas? We didn't get onto the lube, like, shower, like the shower stuff, like, come on. But, so lube, like, blisters are a reality. When porn is so accessible, they can go back to it. If you can't get to the next class or to sports, you can't get to the next thing in your day without masturbating, you got a problem. Or if you need to do it in front of people, you got a problem. So really, I say to kids, masturbate, don't worry too much, but do it unaided with erotic literature. Not erotic literature you find online, because if you're looking for something healthy or feminist porn, really hard to get by all the stuff they want you to see. So I always equate it with you're going up the highway and 100 miles down the highway, there's an amazing salad bar place. And you want to feed yourself healthy food. But there's 18 exits with pizza places and Italian restaurants and Thai food and all this food and McDonald's, and you're going to have to pass up all those exits to get to the salad bar. Getting on the internet to find feminist porn, that is what that is like. You're never going to get by the traps of what's out there. So I think talking to guys about try a month, see what happens. If you've really got a habit, go 2 months. The more you get away from it, the more your brain shifts. Another thing, some people say, some gay boys will say, okay, I am gay. I am not interested in girls. Why am I aroused by heterosexual porn? Like, what's up with that? Or heterosexual people say, why does gay porn turn me on? Like, why does that turn me on? I don't think I'm gay. I don't think I'm gay, but maybe I am gay. Actually, porn is so enticing that whatever, naked people doing things you don't normally see is intoxicating. So it's when you take a break from porn, your natural desires will return to you. Like the brain will recalibrate. But a lot of interesting stuff on your brain on porn. Yes?
One of the things that is offered sometimes is when middle school kids, particularly girls, start to sense the power of sex and the power of accusation. He touched me. Do you have any approach for that?
Yes, so it's a mixed thing with girls. So they get to an age and they're like, wait a second, this is a power, but this is also don't touch with a clear boundaries. So talking about clear boundaries, that it's a complicated thing for girls. So sometimes in a middle school, girls will come to the guidance counselor or the principal and say, this boy is hugging all the girls because he wants to feel our breasts, and we're sick of it. And unfortunately, a lot of schools will not talk to the creepy kid who's hugging. They instead will outlaw hugging in the school, so they don't have the conversation. So it's tricky with girls. That's a parent conversation, but as doctors, you want to talk to, I think reading Girls and Sex, I would recommend reading Girls and Sex by Peggy Orenstein, and which really gets into that, where's empowerment and where is, so the asking for it, which there is a book called Asking For It that's worth reading, that so many people say, well, what she wears, how she acts. And really what the message we need to give girls is, you should be able to wear what you want, dress how you want, show as much cleavage. I would say to my own, I would love to not have the onus on my daughter when she goes off to college, but I talk to my boys probably more about respect and boundaries and testing boundaries and respectful language. I talk as much as my boys head off to college or into a group, but with girls, we put the onus on girls. Don't let anyone give you a drink. Don't get too drunk. Don't wear that. Don't dance like that. And that we give that message to girls. I would love to say to my daughter heading off to college, you should be able to be as drunk as you want, dancing in a thong, and be passed out on the floor, and you should be able to stay safe. In an ideal world, that would be great. And most people at that party are not going to take advantage of someone. Especially now, intervention has become much more of a thing. But I will say to my daughter, you've got to think about the few people in the room who will read that differently. That's how I approach it with my own daughter. Middle school, I think there's a book called Dating Smarts by Amy Lang, it's on my list. She's fantastic. She wrote Birds and Bees and Kids, and she also wrote Dating Smarts, and that's a great resource for middle school kids. A new book just came out. It's for $8.99. You can get it. It's not out in print. Called 15 Conversations You Should Have with Your Kids. It's called Colette Smart is the author. It's also on my list. And this looks really interesting. I mean, these conversations about consent and respect and respecting yourself, I think we just have to be careful not to say to girls, if you respected yourself, you wouldn't wear that. I mean, when my girl was growing up, I said, look, we're going to go to the store and we're going to buy you pants. I will get you jeans. I know you want skinny jeans. I'm going to buy you skinny jeans that are your size. If you'd like to buy 2 sizes small so you have a camel toe and we can see your labia, you can get yourself to Kohl's and bring your own money and buy your own pants. Like, that's how I roll with him right out. We had that conversation at home. And we're in the store, and she's like, see, there's no camel toe, there's no camel. Like, we have those conversations. And I'm just like, that's too much data. No one needs to see that. And the same with my boy, if he was hanging his stuff out the back, I'm like, don't need it. We do not need to see that. And you know, dads at pickup, when a dad comes to pick up in his bike shorts, my husband's a huge biker. Before he'd go to kindergarten pickup, he would put shorts over the shorts. Why is that? People say, you should be comfortable with your body. He goes, I'm plenty comfortable with my body. But these little 5-year-olds do not need to see every part of my gear here. Like, they do not need to see a mushroom cap in the pants. Like, that needs to be not in their face. And some dads strutting around, and I don't want to see the mom. Halloween. It blows my mind how many cat suits come out on Halloween. I used to love to go to pickup. I'm like, 10 today, cat suit day. Every woman's chance to dress like Poontang Sally. I'm working. And like with the stroller around town. That message, I'm like, oh my gosh, ladies, come on. Like, so Halloween is another place where I think there needs to be more conversation. And people felt sad for my daughter. They said, your daughter is so cute. Like, we've got a bag of clothes for you to help you out. And then you'd open up this bag of clothes for the 18-month-old, the 4-year-old, and be like these little things written on the bum, these little things. I'm like, whoop, those are going to somewhere else. They're not coming to our house. And then I've deprived my daughter of her femininity. I think the culture does a fantastic job of getting 12-year-old girls right up to speed on what is expected. I do not need to jumpstart it. Had a nursery school teacher say, tell your mom you need to brush your hair. She needs to brush her hair, and tell your mom she needs to match your clothes more. I never went in to talk to teachers. I feel like whatever happens in school, we'll process it at home. I'm in there, did not chew that lady out because she would have crumbled. I went to the head teacher and just said, I think I'm pretty psyched that my kid is not, at 3 and 4 years old, is not thinking about her hairbrush, and she dresses herself, which is fantastic, people. I don't care what she wears. Like, please don't give her feedback. Like, they were like, gotcha, gotcha. But we still, in 2019, have that. I'm going to let you go. Okay, thank you very much.